Hey folks, in the last chapter of Soft Plastics 101, we looked at a soft plastics kit for fishing the skinny water for bass, especially fishing that structure in those tight creeks in gorge country and that sort of thing. Today we're getting into more open water, we're fishing those bigger impoundments and we're fishing deeper water. So we need to look at some options for fishing that deep water, targeting those schooled bass, and we've got some absolute gun plastics and jig heads here to show you. So, schooled bass, a lot of the time a sounder is extremely effective. Otherwise, you're looking at the natural structure of the area. So if there's a point that comes down into the water, it's likely that point continues out into the water. If there's a valley coming out, it's likely that valley will continue out into the water. So if you don't have a sounder, utilize that landscape and that around you to help you find that different structure that may be holding the fish. If you're looking on your sounder, you'll find fish will often be hugged tight to the bottom, in which case sometimes we've got to finesse it up and fish really slow. Otherwise, if you've got those crisscross of active fish on your sounder, it's more likely that they're going to feed actively, and a wider array of techniques will work on those species when they are feeding actively. Plastics are dynamite when those fish are shut down. It's a tough bite and you can slow it right down and work those plastics. And there's two Z-Man plastics that have been fantastic in terms of tournament anglers for the bass, but also for the social fishers, and they've dominated a lot of tournaments and won a lot of tournaments. Those two plastics, 2.5 inch grubs, which is a curl tail plastic, and the 2.5 inch slim swims, which is that little paddle tail plastic. So they're imitating the smaller food that's in that system, and you'll see a lot of the time, you know, those little gudgeons and those little rainbow fish and things that are in that water that the bass are feeding on, that slim swims is a dynamite representation of that. The 2.5 inch grubs, a lot of movement, a lot of action in that tail without having to move the plastic aggressively, so you can fish that dead slow. Fishing these, guys will often just fish long casts and fish them slow and hug the bottom. Otherwise, they'll bring them up through the water column, free spool them back down, up through the water column, free spool them back down. And another way that they fish them is to fish them vertically. So you can actually cast them out beside timber or just to the schooled fish, allow them to fall right to the bottom, and retrieve them with a dead slow vertical retrieve up through the system. So that's two good plastics to start with, 2.5 inch grubs, 2.5 inch slim swims. Some dams that you fish, impoundments, lakes, bigger bait, bigger fish, and you'll often upsize your plastic in those situations. Paddle tail plastic, again, very effective. And the 3 inch slim swims and 3 inch minnows, sorry, they're both deadly on the bass. That's always been a gun plastic on the bass, and the slim swims just thins it down a bit to give it a little bit more of a finesse style of profile in that 3 inch paddle tail. So that's the 3 inch slim swims and a 3 inch minnows. A few others that are starting to get some attention, 3.5 inch trick swims with its underhooked paddle tail. So you can fish that dead slow and that big paddle tail gives it a crazy action. So I'm seeing more and more photos of quality bass landed on that 3.5 inch trick swims. And then a couple of crustacean imitations. You know, you've got those red claw or blue claw, the different yabbies and shrimps and things that are in those impoundments. So that little 2.5 inch TRD craws is a great little plastic for the bass, and so is that 4 inch turbo craws with its flapping claws. So out of the pack, don't forget to separate the claws, snap that little piece out of the middle, and you've got a plastic that has a lot of action, a lot of flapping arm action that you can fish on the surface right down to deep water subsurface fishing. So that's a few of our go-to plastics when we're fishing impoundments and we're targeting those deep water fish. When you're looking at your sounder and that sort of thing, check out around that magic 20 foot mark. When you look at sounders, you'll see around that magic 20 foot, you get thermoclines and that sort of thing on your sounder. Attracts a lot of bait, a lot of food, and it in turn attracts the fish as well to that area. So check out that 20 foot mark. So when we're fishing 20 foot, 30 foot, deeper again even, of course, a lot more jig head weight comes into it than when we're fishing our skinny water bass. So commonly guys will start around that 1/8 of an ounce when they're fishing that vertical dead slow retrieve and fishing a bit more finessey and shallower impoundments. They'll start around that 1/8, 1/6, quarter, 3/8 and ½ ounce is commonly your jig heads that you will fish for impoundment bass. And the ½ ounce allows you big long casts across the flats, and it allows you to retrieve that plastic and hug the bottom nice and tight so you're right down there where the fish are. Also, in terms of jigs, we'll go through our others. So we've got our Headlocks Finesse. So as we've discussed in the past, our Headlocks Finesse and our Headlocks HD Black on the top of the pack for the Headlocks HD, blue on the top of the pack for the Headlocks Finesse. The Finesse hook is very, very popular for the bass. It's a finer gauge Gamakatsu hook, so that slight tap and the hookup rate, the penetration rate is more effective on those Finesse jig heads. So if you're extracting bass from heavy cover and you're fighting them on heavier lines, you may want to go to the HD, otherwise that Headlocks Finesse is the go-to. So here's our guys here rigged on the Headlocks Finesse. There's our 2.5 inch grubs on a 1/8. We step it up, there's a 1/4 ounce 1/0 with the slim swims, and there's a 1/2 ounce 3/0 with a 3 inch minnow, which is a popular plastic for dredging those deeper schools when they're hugging close to the bottom. That one there's won itself a lot of tournaments as well. That's a straight Headlocks Finesse jig head. Some anglers like to go for the Demon's head with that painted head. If it's a tough bite, you can match that plastic to your jig head, or you can put a jig head on there that pops and provides a bit of different color. So there's our same presentation, but we've gone from the Headlocks Finesse jig head to that Demon's painted jig head. A Demon's painted jig head again to match our 2.5 inch slim swims, and there's a heavy head on our Mood Ring 3 inch slim swims as well. So that painted Demon's head is a great option for those bass, especially when the bite's a bit tougher. You can really match that plastic to the head. Other jig heads to keep an eye out for if you want to go and chase a few bass. A lot of guys throw spinnerbaits and that sort of thing in the impoundments as well. That's a big aggressive lure that's looking for a reaction bite. But if you still want to add a bit of that flash and vibration without the size or aggressive nature of a spinnerbait, you can check out those Rev Locks. So that's our same presentation again, but we've got that addition of the blade on the bottom of the jig head there. So that blade adds flash and vibration to attract those bass to the lure. Pretty good if you want to prospect and cover a lot of area searching for fish, because that blade will draw the fish to the lure. They're available in a stack of sizes, and you'll see there that's a willow blade on that one, and that's a Colorado blade on that one. Colorado's a rounder blade, works at slower speeds, stronger thump. If you want to fish a bit quicker or deeper, that willow blade allows it to run deeper and spins at quicker speeds. And they're available in gold and also in nickel. So the gold is preferred in dirtier water and darker water and tannin stained water, and the silver is preferred in the clear impoundments generally, but you can mix and match until you find what works on the day. And our other option in terms of adding a blade to our soft plastic is our Jig Spinners, which we've spoken about in the past as well. So that's a size 1, and you can see the size 3 is a bigger jig spinner. So adding more thump, more vibration, more flash as you go bigger, but also if you want to go more finessey, you drop that blade size down, and you can, there's a deadly presentation with the size 1 on the 2.5 inch slim swims. That one there's a big prospector for covering a lot of water, fishing deep water. 1/2 ounce 3/0 head on that 3 inch minnows with a bigger jig spinner on there. And although we're fishing predominantly in the impoundments, we're predominantly in open water, fishing those deep schooled fish. We do sometimes go and fish the edges and fish the edge bites where you can come across the timber. So I generally, whether I'm fishing skinny water or whether I'm fishing open water bass, bigger impoundments, I'll still have a few weedless jig heads with me. So that's the Snake Locks, and I'll fish it in a size 2 on those 2.5 inch slim swims, and a 3/0 on that 3 inch minnows. So that's a Snake Locks Finesse, and that's a standard Snake Locks jig head. So as you can see, we've taken our few plastics that we've got here. We've got a few plastics there, but we've presented them in a stack of different ways until we find out what the fish want on the day. So don't be afraid to mix it up a bit until you find what they want. Also, mixing up your retrieve is a good idea until you find out what the fish want on the day. And we looked at our craw option before. So there's our little 2.5 inch TRD craws, and it's extremely effective as well rigged on a jig. So jigs are proving more and more effective in the impoundments, especially when structure fishing the edges. So that's the Cross Eyes Power Finesse jig in a 1/4 ounce or a 3/8 ounce with that little claw on the back that gets that action of the claws going there and attracts the bass as well. So that's another option for rigging your little craw, but those little craws are going to be a winner, especially in those impoundments that have got yabbies, freshwater yabbies in there. Colour-wise, there's a stack of different colours. Generally, the guys that are winning the bass comps and the proven colours tend to be more natural colours that represent the bait that's in the system. Be it a motor oil, watermelon red, mood ring, mud minnow, green lanterns, the natural bait fish, cray looking colours, Houdini, midnight oil, those sorts of colours that are naturally found in that system tend to produce the most fish. But if it's not working, don't be afraid to change it up. And finally, scent wise, there's a range of scents available. I scent up regularly, especially if I'm fishing really slow, where you want to have every chance you can of getting that big fish to eat that lure. So things like garlic plus bloodworm, aniseed and shrimp are all popular freshwater flavours for those that are chasing bass. So there you go, there's a fair bit of coverage there. 2.5 inch grubs, 2.5 inch slims, some 3 inch plackies as well, a few different jig heads to mix it up, and you're a good chance of catching a solid bass in your local impoundment. All the best with the fishing.